Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Daily Rollup. My name is Kagan Dunlap, and Monday through Friday, we put together 5 to 7 short stories to explain some things that are happening around the world, so that way you don't have to look into it, and we'll do that for you. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So apparently the Israeli Defense Force destroyed some construction equipment that was owned by Hezbollah that was being used to rebuild terror infrastructure, is how they referred to it, I believe. This happened on September 2nd of 2025 in the southern area of Lebanon, specifically near the area of Rab Talatin and Yarun. Now, according to the Israeli Defense Force, the equipment was being used to rebuild infrastructure associated with Hezbollah, like the underground facilities that they build to smuggle weapons and things like that. Now, the strikes were carried out in response to what the IDF characterized as a violation of existing understandings or ceasefire agreements between Israel and Lebanon aimed at preventing the restoration of such sites. Now, obviously, the federal government of Lebanon isn't directly tied to Hezbollah. However, Hezbollah operates in Lebanon pretty much, unimpeded a lot of times because, unfortunately, the Lebanese government doesn't have as much backing as Hezbollah does because Hezbollah is backed by Iran. And Iran has a lot more money than Lebanon is. Lebanon is in kind of dire straits, economically speaking. So it's hard for them to really do anything, even if they don't want them in the country, which I don't think that the Lebanese military wants Hezbollah in there. They just don't have the capabilities of stopping them right now. Now, this operation involved targeting 2 engineering vehicles with no immediate reports of casualties from the strikes themselves. And then the footage that was circulating around social media was the strike actually occurring on what looks like an excavator. Now, the IDF has emphasized that it's going to continue these operations in order to neutralize any perceived threats to Israeli security in the region. And obviously, Israel has an ability to respond to Hezbollah in a much more, in a greater way than the Lebanese government has. So they typically, based on historical data, they typically take action whenever they have the opportunity to. Now, this incident occurred amid ongoing cross-border tensions between Israel and Hezbollah that's kind of persisted since the escalation after October 7th of 2023. So there's been no official response from Hezbollah yet or the Lebanese government, although I'm sure that we'll see one soon. So Ukrainian aviation forces conducted a precision strike that resulted in destroying a large grain elevator in the Kherson region, completely leveling the building after Russian forces had moved in and occupied it in order to repurpose it to become a drone operator training center as well as a command post. This happened on September 2nd of 2025. Now, this strike is just part of Ukraine's ongoing efforts to disrupt Russian military logistics and drone operations in the region, specifically along the Dnipro River's right bank, because there's a lot of strikes that come across the Dnipro River into civilian infrastructure. Now, the grain elevator was located in Rollup in the Kherson region. And like I said, Russian forces had converted it into a command structure and drone training facility, like a drone operator training facility. And this has been pretty frequent because the Russians typically move in and they repurpose civilian infrastructure to serve as a military asset, kind of blending the civilian infrastructure with military assets and non-combat sites. But it also increases risks to local civilians and infrastructure as well as agriculture because you're turning civilian infrastructure into a military site. And so when the Ukrainians come back to target it, they're damaging and destroying civilian infrastructure. It's kind of a between a rock and a hard place situation. So some video footage recently of a train heading westward towards the front lines in Ukraine on September 1st of 2025 carrying Russian T-62M and Russian T-62MV tanks. Looks like quite a few of them. Now, people have been speculating that a lot of these tanks could have potentially come from storage depots in Siberia or other places in the Far East in Russia. And most of the tanks look like they've got basic modifications on them, like they've got like the drone canopy, but it's not really like a heavy like counter UAS modification. I'm assuming they just wanted to get something basic on there so they could expedite getting them to the front as quickly as possible and then put the actual main drone deterrence or protection equipment on them aftermarket wise once they actually arrived on the front lines. It's still interesting seeing them pull out massive quantities and stores of T-62s and tanks that are around that age period, because a lot of these were manufactured in the 1960s and 70s, which they probably have a massive surplus of these tanks because of the fact that they were manufactured during that time frame, during like the Cold War buildup, and they just burn through these things. They're just burning through them, you know? This is also pretty typical of what Russia's been doing over the past 3 years since the full-scale invasion began, because they've pulled thousands of older tanks out from long-term storage in order to replenish their depleted modern fleet out there on the lines. Especially with drone technology, these things get picked off. Like one drone will take out a whole tank, and then it's just like a tank hulk that's destroyed on the battlefield. Like by early 2025, for example, there is visually confirmed Russian tank losses that have exceeded 3,000, with T-62 variants accounting for over 240 destroyed or captured, according to open source intelligence reporting sites. Now, some people have considered this to be like a desperate measure to get more armor on the battlefield, because like most of the T-62s were introduced in 1961, and there was like apparently over 20,000 were produced historically speaking, but technologically they're pretty obsolete compared to a lot of the contemporary Western or even Russian main battle tanks of today. So the internet's been kind of losing its mind the past day, because the Ministry of Health of France issued directives to regional health agencies recently to prepare hospitals for the potential influx of large numbers of wounded soldiers in the event of a major military conflict. And the preparation was targeted to be prepared and completed by March of 2026. The instructions stem from a letter that was dated July 18th of 2025, which was leaked and first reported by the French satirical newspaper Le Canard Enchaîné. Probably mispronouncing that. Anyway, some of the key details of the directive are that hospitals are urged to develop plans for handling 10,000 to 15,000 wounded soldiers over periods ranging from 10 to 180 days. This includes setting up temporary intake centers, increasing surge capacity, and activating Plan Blanc, which is France's emergency response protocol for mass casualties. Medical staff must receive training in war trauma, including like blast injuries, gunshot wounds, chemical exposures, things like that, and psychological care to address the mental health impacts on soldiers. The preparations needed to be in place by March of 2026, with regional plans submitted promptly. This is being framed as a precautionary measure amid rising geopolitical tensions in Europe, particularly concerns over escalation in the Russia-Ukraine conflict or broader NATO involvement. Now, the story's gained a lot of traction on social media, with some outlets sensationalizing it as a sign of impending World War III, though official statements emphasize that it is proactive planning rather than alarmism. Now, so far, there's been no confirmation from the French government or denial from the French government, but the leaked documents appear to be credible based on multiple corroborating sources. So today, September 2nd of 2025, marks the 80th anniversary of the surrender of Japan, which took place on September 2nd of 1945. Following Emperor Hirohito's announcement of Japan's unconditional surrender on August 15th of 1945. Now, the Japanese instrument of surrender, as they were referring to it, was signed aboard the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, Japan, and the ceremony lasted approximately 23 minutes and was broadcast worldwide, symbolizing the Allied victory after years of brutal conflict in the Pacific and the island hopping campaign. The document was prepared by General Douglas MacArthur's staff using rare parchment that was purchased and sourced from Manila. Some of the key representatives that were part of the event were the Japanese Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu, who signed on behalf of the emperor and Japanese government at 9:04 a.m., followed by General Yoshijiro Umezu, Chief of the Army General Staff, at 9:06 a.m., representing the Japanese Imperial Guard headquarters. Now, the Allied representatives was General Douglas MacArthur as Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers, who accepted the surrender and signed first at 9:08 a.m. He was followed by Fleet Admiral Chesty W. Nimitz, who signed for the United States. There were some other signatories as well that signed, including the General Tsu Young Chang from China, Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser from the United Kingdom, Lieutenant General Kuzma Derevyanko from the Soviet Union, and General Thomas Blamey of Australia, Colonel Lawrence Moore Cosgrave from Canada, General Philip Leclerc of France, Admiral Conrad Helfrich of the Netherlands, and Air Vice Marshal Leonard Isett from New Zealand. Oh, man. Now, MacArthur used 6 different pens for his signature, distributing them as mementos to figures like General Jonathan Wainwright and Lieutenant General Arthur Percival, who were both former Allied prisoners of the Japanese at one point, with the final red pen given to his wife. Now, Nimitz pens are preserved in museums in Nanjing and the U.S. Naval Academy. In addition to that, there is a historic flag that was flown by Commodore Matthew Perry during his 1853 to 1854 expedition to Japan, and that was displayed on the USS Missouri, shown reverse side out for conservation reasons. Now, funny enough, Canada's representative, Colonel Lawrence Moore Cosgrave, signed on the wrong line when he was signing the document, leading to handwritten corrections by General Richard K. Sutherland, which the Japanese initially protested but ultimately accepted. Now, the reason that the USS Missouri was chosen to be the venue was partly because of the fact that President Harry S. Truman's home state of Missouri was where the battleship got its name from. Now, today it's a museum ship in Pearl Harbor with replicas of the signing table and a bronze plaque marking the exact spot on its surrender deck, which if you've never been, you need to go. I've only been a couple of times and it was 100% worth it. Well worth the trip. All right, guys, that's it for the daily roll-up for today. I appreciate you sticking around till now. If you didn't know, sticking around watching the entire video helps actually support the channel in a very large way. So does liking and subscribing and leaving comments and sharing and all that stuff. It helps support the channel. It helps enable me to continue to do this stuff because it helps pay for the editing team and it helps pay for all the time and everything and the effort that gets put into these things. So please let us know what you thought about this video in the comments below, and share and like and subscribe and share it with your friends. You know, let us know if there's anything you want to see in the future, if there's things you want to see us cover that we haven't covered before, if there's certain topics you'd like us to look into that we haven't talked about yet that may be something of interest to you, or if there's things that you think that we can improve upon or things that we're doing well. Let us know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.